Hello and welcome to this video. As hinted at in the previous one, I'm actually going to decorate this phone case with a cute little bird painting. So this phone case is going to be a gift, so I wanted to pick out a case that actually matches really well as a background, and I found this really pretty green one. And I think this is going to be really helpful in making the little drawing pop that I'm going to paint on top. And this is also going to be a bit different to the one I previously painted, because in this case I'm having to layer a little bit more and having to have like a base layer. Now I'm starting off here every layer to make it extra adherent with mixing my acrylics with some decoupage or Mod Podge, and this just usually helps really well with it sticking better as a base. You could also use gessos, but gesso usually leaves a little bit of texture behind. So I found that mixing your paints like this works super well for flatter pieces. I did this the same way for a lot of my LPS customs. And I also am always doing this when I'm painting miniatures. Not D&D miniatures, but miniatures for dioramas or things like that. So here I did a slight pre-sketch that was more so indenting the faux leather. And then I'm just tracing this with some lighter paints. I chose the lighter brown for the stem, and then I this time decided to paint the stem first. And then it's time to draw out the bird. And as always, I'm using real life photo references. And with them, I'm planning and mapping out all the colors of this bird. In the previous one, I mentioned that that one was my practice piece for this one. So I'm going to keep with a very similar style, just with the added bonus that in this case I can actually blend, pun intended. So, you know, I am definitely going to blend a little more than I did on the paper, because where the paper would rip, you know, this phone case is very sturdy and doesn't really absorb the paint, so I don't need to be careful with this at all. And this time I'm once again starting out with the little feet. And these have a very different undertone to them. These are more yellowy brownish, which was very refreshing to draw, and I think they turned out super cute. For the branch that the bird sits on, I decided to go with a simple branch with a little bit of green tones and mossy tones. So it doesn't have as much of a gradient or variation as the other one that I used from other piece, but this one I wanted to also make a little bit darker since the feet have similar shades. And then the last one, I'm fleshing out the beak and things like that. And I'm using a really fine brush here. On the other one, I could draw the bird a little bit larger since the tissue paper box essentially has way more of a larger surface, while this phone case obviously is very small, so I'm actually using my miniature painting brushes here, and these came in so handy. I love them so much. I purchased these a year ago or so instead of the cheap nail art brushes that I was using, and I'm just obsessed with them, and I always take care of them so well and try to keep them clean and keep them from bending and things like that. These are Vallejo brand, by the way. So they were a bit more expensive, but after years of using the cheap ones, these are so worth it to me. But if you don't really use miniature paintbrushes and things like that often, getting the really cheap miniature nail brush sets that you can find on Amazon and stuff, those are also working really well for quite a while. My previous set I had for 2.5 years before the brushes were way too frayed and I couldn't save them anymore with hot water and things like that. So, you know, if you don't use miniature brushes that often and you just want them for a couple detail pieces, definitely you don't have to spend all the money on these expensive ones. You can just get the cheap sets that are is $10 for like a 20 set of brushes or something. They're so ridiculously cheap, and they work surprisingly well too. But again, after years of using those, I treated myself to these, and for me it definitely was worth it. Especially in like painting like this, where I need the like finer tips and I need them to like stay finer. This worked out really well. But for the bulk areas where I didn't need the fine tip, I actually used another set of like cheap paintbrushes that I also got from Amazon like years back. And these I've boiled so many times in hot water to get the brushes like fine. And they don't really stay that fine anymore when I paint for a while with them, but they definitely work a great bit still for these like larger surfaces of colors. But for the tiny details, like the detail brushes are definitely just pure gold. And in this case, while I finished like sections of other like colors in the previous one first before I went to the next color, in this one I'm actually just applying the base colors to each area. The reason being just that I can like layer on the paint a little differently in this one, because again I don't have paper as a backing. So I can layer the base color, then the base patterns, then blend this a little bit and work on the next color. And in this case, you know, it made it definitely way easier to like place the pattern. But I think both techniques worked really well. I think it also really depends on which kind of design you go with. Like with this bird, I felt way more comfortable to like draw in the larger sections of colors, whereas with the other one, I felt like the pattern of colors were like a bit more intricate, so like working section by section worked a bit better for me in that one. But I guess that's, you know, what you need to decide for yourself when you paint these, and why you like need to test out which technique you like more. So I'm slowly going from the like chest down, and I'm adding like the hinted at feathers. Again, like in the previous one, I'm not planning on going like full detail. I want to hint at all the details and the layered feathers and things like that. So I'm trying to like draw them in a little bit more and make them look fluffy and add the nice colors. But I'm also really not trying to go overboard here. The wings and the tail feathers on this one were, I think, one of my favorite parts, because I just really love to get the structures and details on them. Well, it was very difficult. I think they turned out super nicely, and like painting wise, they were definitely some of the easiest to like get right, because they're just a couple feathers that are layered. So I didn't have to worry about it looking too clean or wrong. So this was very welcomed after, you know, trying to get the other areas to look neatly. Also, the other thing I really liked to paint in was the eye. I really enjoyed painting in the eye since it gave it so much life. And I think it looks so adorable already in this stage. So at this point I was really excited to see the finished piece. The feathers, especially on the wings, started to stand out really well once I added all the little highlights and shadows. And I was really happy at this point that I practiced with my other piece to know like what works and what doesn't in terms of details, because like if I didn't do that, I already could feel with this one that I would have gone overboard with the separate feathers and things like that. So, you know, having that one practice piece was definitely so helpful, because obviously the stakes are way higher. Like, if I messed up on the paper, I could just get out a new piece of paper and start again. But on this phone case, it would have been so much more difficult to actually start over. I could have probably wiped everything off with alcohol and start anew, but like, I'm not too sure how the surface would react, especially since it's faux leather, if I like soak it in alcohol and, you know, clean it a couple of times. So I really wanted to get this the first try, and luckily I managed. But yeah, I added some finer touches here and there once I finished the wings, and with that, this phone case was practically finished. I did add like several coats of matte acrylic spray varnish on top of it. I added like 4 or 5 layers just to make sure it's like really sealed in, since this is a use case item that gets pulled out of pockets and things like that quite a bit. And I'm going to make sure that like every half year or so that this case will last, I will apply another coat or 2 of varnish on top, after like wiping it off with just a slightly wet tissue paper or something, just to make sure that it has the best of chances to, you know, not fade for as long as I possibly can prevent it to. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this custom, and did you ever customize a phone case before, and if so, which design? And also, what kind of phone case was it? Because in this case, it's one of those flip cases. But I also did customize some of the, like, gummy silicone cases before. And they do behave a little differently, obviously. But that was also a great ton of fun. And as always, I hope you have a great day. See you next time. Bye bye!